We're here with Senior Advisor to the President Trump and Assistant to the President, Steve Witkoff. Steve, I really want to thank you for joining us here at the White House, this amazing room here. Apparently, this used to be Joe Biden's secret special fake Oval Office here, but the Trump White House has turned it into an amazing studio to do interviews like this. So thank you for taking the time to sit down with us.
My pleasure, Matt. My first time here. I didn't know it existed.
A pretty amazing room. So, okay, lots of stuff to talk about here, but President Trump really is the deal maker in chief. We saw him roll out a UK trade deal this morning, and I know there's a lot more coming on that front, but you are really focused on these peace deals that he is trying to reach around the world. Can you talk to us about what the president wants to accomplish, what he views his role as on the world stage here as he tries to seek peace, whether it's in the Middle East with a number of different fronts or in Europe with what we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, Matt, I've been asked that question before, and I answer it the same way each and every time. He believes in peace through strength, which essentially means that resorting to violence and war is not necessarily in the best interests of the country and not necessarily the best way to effect truces, ceasefires, permanent peaces, whatever we want to call it. He's the leader of a superpower, the most powerful nation on the earth, and if he wanted to, he could exert a military force everywhere, and he just doesn't think it's productive in many circumstances. And so dialogue and diplomacy are an avenue that he wants to pursue each and every time, because if he can get to a successful resolution in the best interest of the United States peacefully, that's a better prescription for solving some of these world problems that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. So you have a really interesting career trajectory. You had a business career. You've known President Trump since both of you guys were New York business guys.
Yes.
How did you get into this? How did you get to this moment where you are today? Negotiating with the leaders of other countries around the world.
Well, the president and I are very close friends, and I treasure that. I call it a blessing in my life. It really is, because he's an inspiration to me in a lot of ways. Before he was elected, he was being persecuted. 4 separate trials, which I thought were abhorrent, and I said it publicly. I testified for him in his AG case. I came with him and spent a lot of time at the criminal proceedings that Alvin Bragg was running, which felt like a completely rigged situation. And we just talked, endlessly about lots of things. And when he got elected, he said to me, "Would you consider doing something?" And what I always wanted to do was do something that felt worthy, that felt consequential, felt bigger than myself. And we talked about the Middle East, and so that's how it came to be. And I, of course, didn't understand the dimensions of it. now I do, the awesome responsibility that it is. But working for him is an amazing thing, because he sets the table for people like me.
We've seen repeatedly from the neocon, warmonger, globalist establishment as they've come after you aggressively here as you are closing in on these negotiations around the world. We've seen attacks in the New York Post. There was a hit piece from this guy, Douglas Murray. I think there are various neocon-type organizations that are attacking you. What's your response to the critics? Tell us, how do you respond to those guys?
Well, Douglas Murray was particularly frustrating because nobody called me, and they didn't give me an opportunity to rebut, dispute, tell my side of the story. So I think they largely got it wrong, and I think that was a mistake on their part, and so I chalk it up to that. But to me, I follow the president's credo. The best way to respond to criticism is to do good things. I actually believe, I'm very loyal to the president, but I actually believe in his policy. I really do. I believe in his policy of attempting to settle the Iranian conflict through dialogue. First of all, that's a more permanent solution to that crisis than any other alternative. That would physically change exactly how Iran was approaching a nuclear program. If we get them to voluntarily shift away from an enrichment program where they can enrich, to not have centrifuges, to not have material that can be enriched to weapons grade levels, 90%. If we can get them voluntarily to do that, that is the most permanent way to make sure that they never get a weapon. And so his prescription for the solution there is the best prescription. Now, hopefully, that's something that they want to do, because as he says, the alternative is not a great alternative for them.
Mm-hmm. So what we've seen is, again, these attacks have continued from these critics, but another one that I saw out there, fake news, I think it was Politico and among other places, were trying to say, oh, there's all sorts of daylight between you and Secretary Rubio on a lot of these talks. Talk to us a little bit about that. I know you guys issued a joint statement in response to that stuff, but from what I understand, you guys have a great working relationship, and everybody else I've talked to around President Trump that's involved in these talks, everybody speaks highly of you, and they all say the whole team is working together very well. So what's your response to those attacks?
It is total fake news. The Secretary of State and I are close friends. We don't just have a cordial working relationship together. We have a real friendship, a deep friendship, and we confer and we talk all the time. I might talk to the Secretary of State 5 to 7 times a day. And I'm not talking, and that's, on our telephones. I'm not even talking about situation room calls or meetings that we have or joint meetings that we have in the Oval Office. There's no daylight between us, and we're both very, very similar in our policy approach. So I read that story, Matt. I thought to myself, who are they talking about? I could not figure out who they were talking about.
Yeah, it's truly unbelievable. I think that the part of the reason why this maybe is happening is that, again, some of these people maybe don't want a deal. They don't want to see peace reached in a lot of these places. They don't want to see a deal with the Iranians. They like conflict. They don't want to see a deal reached with Gaza. They don't want to see a war end in Ukraine. What say you?
I say it's confirmation bias. They believe they have a bias towards military interaction, and so in their minds, anything that is of a military solution, of a military nature to be a solution to that problem, they have a bias towards that, with no consideration whatsoever on what the consequences are of that. And you hear this all the time. You hear people say, no, we have to go treat that person with force. The Iranians are going to manipulate you in a dialogue, and so you're not going to be effective there. They may attempt to manipulate me. I don't think that they're going to be able to manipulate me. In that particular example, if the Iranians make the mistake of thinking that they can procrastinate at the table, then they won't see much of me. And the alternative, as the president says, will be a bad alternative for them. But you're right. The neocon element believes that war is the only way to solve things. And the president believes that his force of personality, the way he is going to respond to situations, can bend people to do things in a much better way in the interest of the United States government. And I believe in that too.
So the last thing here on the critics, and then I want to get into several of the major theaters of the various talks that you're having around the world, because it's really important stuff. But one of the things that you'll hear them say is they will say, oh, you need to have experts with you that know what they're doing when you're going in to go meet with Vladimir Putin, or you're going in to go meet with the Iranians, or whatever. First off, I mean, I think you do have a lot of experts around. I've met a bunch of your staffers today before this interview and in the lead up to it. But also, those same career foreign policy people are the people that got us into this mess to begin with. I mean, what do you say to those critics that say, oh, we need to have, when you go into the room in this place, you need to have this expert and that expert and whatever. I mean, what do you say to those people?
Well, I think some of them are well-meaning, but that doesn't mean that well-meaning translates into doing the job in a way that is the most efficient. So I think people are well-meaning. There are some who have bad motivations. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think everybody has a bad motivation. I just think that they're used to doing things in a certain way that's historically been that way, and it's very inert and bureaucratic, and it doesn't seem to work. The Israeli negotiation, the hostage negotiation, is a perfect example of it. They spent 15 months working on that hostage negotiation, And we came in, and we means the Trump administration, and we were able to correct what had been, not been an efficient negotiation, and we got a lot of hostages home alive as a result of that. So, I think the president wants things done a different way. He wants a more proactive approach. He wants people getting out in the field. My meetings with Vladimir Putin, outsiders were not invited. Should I have said to Vladimir Putin, I don't want to open up a dialogue with you? I don't want to have a relationship with you? Biden hadn't talked to him in 3.5 years. At the direction of the president, I had an opportunity to make contact with President Putin. He is a central protagonist in that conflict. If we're not talking to him, how do we ever think that we're going to affect a resolution there? It's not even possible. So the notion that we're not supposed to talk to him is totally preposterous, or that I should talk to him and condition those talks on being able to bring an interpreter there or other people there. I did not need anybody there. It actually worked better being there alone and then downloading our leadership, our foreign policy team afterwards.
So, from what I understand, President Trump has a big trip to the Middle East upcoming. You're going to be joining him on a number of these stops. He's going to Saudi Arabia, to UAE, to Qatar. And then also you have the next round of talks coming up as well with the Iranians in Oman. Can you kind of preview this trip that you're going to be taking with President Trump to the Middle East more broadly, and then kind of tell us where do we stand with the Iranians as you go into, from what I understand, this is your 4th meeting upcoming with them.
Yes.
So where do we stand going into this 4th meeting?
Well, we've stated our position.
Mm-hmm.
The Iranians cannot have a bomb. And they have stated back that they don't want one. So we're going to, for the purposes of this discussion, accept them at their word that that's actually how they feel. If that's how they feel, then their enrichment facilities have to be dismantled. They cannot have centrifuges. They have to blend all of their fuel that they have there, send it to a faraway place, and they have to convert to a civil program if they want to run a civil program. Now, they have a civil reactor actually in the state of Iran. It's called Bushehr. And they have no enrichment capability at this place. And so if we take them at their word, why not just turn all the rest of their facilities just like Bushehr? Bushehr, they have no ability to enrich. They have no ability to have centrifuges there. They can only use that facility for civilian purposes, making of electricity, things of that sort for civilian purposes. And if that's what they choose to do, if they believe in that program, they ought to expand it if they want to. But an enrichment program can never exist in the state of Iran ever again. And that's our red line. No enrichment, that means dismantlement. It means no weaponization. And it means that Natanz, Fordow, and Esfahan, those are their 3 enrichment facilities, have to be dismantled.
So if they're saying this stuff, are you at all concerned that we end up at a place where, a deal looks like a JCPOA from the Obama administration? Or are the Iranians in a different position today than they were, a decade or so ago when they were negotiating that deal? Does this deal look a lot different than that?
I think they're a lot more vulnerable today, but look, we're not. The purpose here is to actually sit with them, and talk them through why they should do it our way. They may not accept that, but it makes no sense to me that they wouldn't accept it. First of all, we're never doing a JCPOA deal where sanctions come off and there's no sunsetting of their obligations. So that doesn't make sense. That was a mismatched procedure in JCPOA. We believe that they cannot have enrichment, they cannot have centrifuges, they cannot have anything that allows them to build a weapon. We believe in all of that. That was not JCPOA. JCPOA had sunset provisions that burned off the obligations and burned off the sanctions relief at inappropriate times. It's never going to happen in this deal.
It sounds like you're confident that they want to work towards a deal. They're saying what you guys are saying.
Well, I'm a rational, sensible person.
Mm-hmm.
So I just believe that they have no choice. I mean, obviously they can say no, but and they can test President Trump. I think that would be an unwise thing to do. I don't mean that in a confrontational way to them if they end up watching this show. I mean it as a reality. They can have a bomb, and they've said they don't want a bomb. They have attested to it. And they've said they only want to operate in a civil way. There are multiple civil nuclear programs all over the world, and they're operating without enrichment capability. They don't need enrichment capability to operate a civil program.
It sounds like you guys are going to really hold to this. Like, you're not going to take a bad deal. You're only going to take a deal if it's a good deal and it meets those requirements.
That's correct. And it was, and look, we didn't think that the talks last week were going to be productive because we needed to get to certain understandings with them. And hopefully this Sunday they will be productive. And hopefully that means that they will continue those talks. If they're not productive on Sunday, then they won't continue, and we'll have to take a different route.
The last thing on Iran, it sounds like the conversations at this point are focused exclusively on nuclear issues.
Correct.
Do you expect there to be broadening of those conversations to include things like, say, a human rights provision like we saw maybe with the Helsinki deal with the Soviets back in the 1970s, or economic conversations, or do you think that it could go broader than the nuclear conversation?
Look, Iran, we're inviting Iran to be a member of the League of Nations. We think that they're industrious people, smart people, historically, savvy, good merchants, all those sorts. I have plenty of friends of Iranian heritage, and there's some interesting people. I mean, authors and doctors and lawyers and so forth. We're saying to Iran, you can be a better nation. We can do business with you. We can have strategic relationships with you, but you can't be a provocateur. Now, our negotiation with them today is limited to nuclear, but do we think that that they need to stop enabling Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and getting and pulling back from being a provocateur? We do believe that. That's a secondary discussion. Do we think that they should not be supplying weapons to people who we consider to be our enemies? We believe that. But again, we don't want to confuse the nuclear discussion, because that, to us, is the existential issue. That's the issue that needs to be solved today and quickly. Okay,
so now moving to Israel and Gaza, where do we stand with regard to a long-term? I mean, I watched your interview with Tucker Carlson. You were talking about how it's going to be a 15 to 20-year project to truly rebuild Gaza. Talk to us a little bit about where do we stand in terms of the situation there at this point.
Well, I mean, there are some aspects of it that are disappointing to me. I wish we could have gotten the last group of hostages out. We may still get them out. I think that it's a tense negotiation. We're in talks every single day. We're talking to the Israelis. We're talking to the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Emiratis. Everybody is focused, particularly as the president's trip is coming up, to get a better result, a peaceful result. And we're hoping that we can do that without the Israelis having to go in. There's some talk about that. I hope it doesn't have to happen. We have a deal on the table that Hamas could have taken 6 weeks ago. I've discussed this with the Israelis at length, and the other stakeholders in this process, the other countries. Hamas should say yes to it. It is a path to a peaceful dialogue and maybe even a peaceful, long-term, durable solution to this. But Hamas is going to have to demilitarize, and they're going to have to quickly get to the terms that we've set forth, and we hope that they do.
Can you tell us what is holding up Hamas from agreeing to this deal? Why are they not agreeing to it? Why didn't they agree to it 6 weeks ago? What are they what are they doing now to stand in the way of a deal?
I wish, as a sensible person, that I could explain their intransigence. I wish I could, but I can't. And remember, I'm not talking to them directly, so there's some dilution because we're talking indirectly through people, and indirectly is not necessarily the best way to negotiate, but in this particular circumstance, talking to a terrorist group, I might do it if the president allowed me to do it, but it doesn't feel to me like it's something that we belong doing right now. They need. I have stated this publicly. They need to show us a sign that they're prepared to act in a positive and proactive way that is better for the people of Gaza and that leads to a long-term durable peace. And if they do that, I think they'll get a good positive response from this country. And if they don't, they won't.
Mm-hmm. On the other side of the equation here, we've seen some stories. I believe there was one just this the last day or so from Israeli state media, or not Israeli state media, an Israeli Hebrew language newspaper that was saying that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have gotten icy with their relationship. I've talked to both of them. I'll be honest with you, I don't know where that's coming from, but I remember when Prime Minister Netanyahu was here for the first visit of a foreign leader to the White House here, that was a very warm. I talked to the Prime Minister afterwards. He said it was the warmest he's ever been received in Washington. He's been around for a long time. What say you in response to that stuff? Are those reports to be believed? Are President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the same page here?
Look, I tell you, Matt, first of all, me and you, sounds like we have a very similar thought process, that half these reports we discount. So
sure,
maybe we should discount more than half the reports.
Maybe most of them, right?
I think this report is going to be deadly accurate right here. But Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli people are a staunch ally of the United States, and it goes back the other way. I've been at multiple meetings with the president and the Prime Minister. They're friendly. They're good friends, in fact. That doesn't mean that they agree on absolutely everything, and I think that's the tendency, right? You get a newspaper person who hears that they have a small disagreement about something that normal human beings like me and you would pay no attention to. But that particular newspaper reporter then conflates that into some large article about some massive issues that they have. It's preposterous. Israel is a great partner for the United States, strategically, economically. We think very much alike. We have very similar objectives. They don't want to see a weaponized nuclear state in the state of Iran. And so I don't think there's much daylight between how they think and how we think from a foreign policy perspective.
Okay, so now moving on here to Russia and Ukraine. I know we're covering a lot of ground here, and you've got a huge charge from President Trump here as you are leading these negotiations worldwide. But Russia and Ukraine, they've started this like 3-day ceasefire thing right now. You guys have been having conversations with both sides. They seem to be productive. We keep seeing movement on this stuff. How do we get both Zelensky and Putin in a room together to hash this out? Because they're all kind of saying similar stuff here, at least publicly. So is that the next stage here? Get the two leaders in a room together? Or?
Look, the president has said, and we believe in what he said, it's a stupid war. It didn't need to happen. It would not have happened if there wasn't a false election and he was president. And so I think that we have to put everybody in a room. Solutions work when there's direct talks. We need to get the Ukrainians and the Russians at the same table. Now, this has been a vicious war, so they don't like each other. We have to change that. We have to get everybody thinking that the responsible way to address a diplomatic solution, if that's what you want, If you, Russia, want that, if you believe in the upsides for your society of ending this war, and you, Ukraine, want it too, we need to get you physically into a room, and I've offered to go spend as much time as they want, mediate that. And what we're suggesting is direct talks between the two parties. Sooner rather than later, the president has issued an ultimatum to both sides that without those direct talks, and if they don't occur quickly, then he believes that the United States ought to step back from this conflict, whatever that means, and just not be involved. This is something that we want to mediate. It's not our war. We didn't start the war, but we want to help to end it. And the way that that happens is a ceasefire where everybody stops the violence and we spend a bit of time together making sure that we can deal with the major issues here. And I think that we can. I think the major issues here are the regions, it's the nuclear plant, it's how the Ukrainians are able to use the Dnieper River and get out to the ocean. There's a lot. There are things here that I don't believe are going to be difficult to solve if we get the parties to the table. They're talking to each other. We're narrowing issues between them, and then we're coming up with compromises and creative solutions to address each of their concerns. We physically get that accomplished, and I think hopefully we'll have some good news soon. We physically get that accomplished. We have, in my view, a strong chance of getting an end to this conflict.
Right, so you've been in the room with Vladimir Putin. You met with him face to face. What was he like in person? What was that meeting like? What were the demands that he had? What were the terms that he has for ending this thing? Talk to us about their side, and then we'll get into the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, well, I've talked to both, on both sides, because how can you be involved in mediating or crafting solutions unless you're talking to everybody? So I've talked to Andrei Yermak, I've talked to President Zelensky, I've talked to their defense minister, Mr. Umerov. We have we have positive discussions, positive relationships. I've talked to all the national security advisors who are involved in this, from England, from France, from Germany, from Italy, and I've talked to President Putin. There is no deal without President Putin's sign-off. He is the leader of the Russian Federation, so the notion that talking to President Putin is somehow, people are against. I don't understand that logic. We need to talk to any stakeholders in this conflict. We have to have a conversation with them, and we can't accept another person's version for what they think. We have to hear it for ourselves. That's how you get to a solution. You put yourself in their shoes and you understand what they need, and now can we accommodate that? Can we effect those sorts of compromises? And that happens from knowing the other person. Those are the assessments that the president has asked people like me to make on his behalf, because he has to be the ultimate decision maker.
So what are the major sticking points that are left between the two sides here, right? Like, I know we're talking about a huge war that's very expensive, very deadly, but from what I understand, like, again, it really doesn't seem like there's that much that can't be solved here. So what are the major sticking points between the two sides?
Well, you're right. I think that we've done a lot to narrow the issues. I think the major sticking points are down to the 5 regions. Mm-hmm. Russia has overwhelming control of 2 of those regions. The Ukrainians have some degree of control over 3 other regions, and so it's about how we're going to assess. There's a difference between where the battle lines are, where the troops are, and the administrative lines, and so we're in a conversation with both sides informally. We want to be direct and at the bargaining table directly, but we're in a conversation around what you would accept Russia in some of these areas. Would you retreat back behind certain administrative lines? The same thing with the Ukrainians. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is a big part of this discussion because it's a little bit of a crown jewel. And yet it's been closed, and we need to reopen that because it delivers a lot of electricity into some of the cities in Kiev. So these are sort of the issues: how Ukraine is going to access the water and get their goods to the marketplace. So, but I think part of the problem is that we haven't been able to get both parties to sit at the table together.
Right. And do you think that that moment is possible here in the near future, that we could see a summit that you're helping mediate between President Zelensky and President Putin? I mean, is that,
I hope so.
Is that doable? Like,
I hope so. And I think it's entirely possible. I think if the U.S. pulls back from this conflict, in other words, doesn't want to be involved with it, says it's not my war, I've tried to do my best, I think that's a bad result for everybody. It's bad for the Europeans, it's bad for the Ukrainians. I don't think it's good for the Russians. I think the Russians actually do want a peaceful settlement, and both sides are trying to figure out what that means for them. Our job is to put them in a room together and to show them that the alternatives to a peaceful resolution here are bad for everybody. That's our job.
Okay, so now the last thing I really want to zone in on here with you is, and I know you guys are going to probably be talking about this when you guys visit Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE, is the next stages of the Abraham Accords. We saw this in a major diplomatic breakthrough from President Trump's first term. There's a huge hope out there that eventually, and I know that some of this is contingent on what happens in some of these other things we're talking about, whether it be Gaza and Israel, whether it be Iran, whether it be what's going on in Europe. But the hope is that the Saudis will maybe eventually join, and that would really help unlock, I think, a lot of what President Trump is trying to do geopolitically and economically worldwide, particularly with regard to countering China. Where do we stand on some of this stuff? Is there hope? Is there a lot of energy moving towards expansion of the Abraham Accords?
There's big energy, Matt, and you bring up a really good point. You know, everyone's focused on these big boy deals, Iran and Russia, Ukraine, and you know and Gaza. But along the way, we're making inroads, real inroads, on bringing countries into the Abraham Peace Accords. My prediction is that sometime relatively soon, we're going to see the potential for Lebanon and even Syria to normalize. There's been strong positive reactions from them. It could happen with Libya. It could happen, and I'm talking about getting countries into the Abraham Peace Accords. It could happen with Azerbaijan and Armenia, where we believe we're very, very close to a settlement, a final settlement of the conflicts in those countries. And both, I believe, might be willing to join the Abraham Peace Accords. So that's a huge initiative for the president. He believes in it. It promotes peace and stability generally in the region. And we are out there. I have a very, very good team. We work with the State Department exceptionally well, which allows us to take advantage of talent from there as needed in some of these conversations that we're having. And I'm really confident that we're going to have 4, 5, maybe 6 countries enter the Abraham Peace Accords in the next couple of months. And it will be a big signal to the world about President Trump's foreign policy initiatives to promote peace and stability in the world.
Right, and then just to really put a fine point on that, if the Saudis join down the road, which you know, I know they're the big one, that they are kind of the linchpin, if you will, for this broader IMEC corridor trade deal that you see from India through the Middle East, which goes through UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, then it goes into Europe through Cyprus, Greece, into Europe, and then over to the U.S. It's the first time we've ever had a counter to the Belt and Road Initiative from the United States. So, I mean, that's the big picture here, right? Like, if the U.S. is going to beat China, and that kind of brings us all full circle, right? Like, so the economic deals that we're talking about and these, you know, peace deals that we're talking about, they all go hand in hand in achieving the president's America First agenda. Am I wrong?
You are so right. It's all totally connected and correlated. And even if, you know, look, the Saudis entering the Abraham Peace Accords and normalization, I think it's something that they want. It's something that they contemplate. I think Gaza has to be solved in some sort of way for them to completely normalize, and I think Gaza will be solved in some sort of way in the very, very near future. And so that hopefully will allow them a pathway. But whenever that occurs, normalization with Israel, Saudi is a really strong ally of ours. And we do business with them, and we have a strategic arrangement with them, and we stand behind them defensively. We have an existing agreement with them. The talks are very, very friendly. They are a critical ally for us. And I think that this is what the president's policy is all about. He is reaching out to all the countries in the GCC. I know that one of the reasons we have this trip is because he believes in maybe what I'll use the word apotheosis of the GCC, like of where it's going and how relevant it is in the world today. And I think it's a really important initiative that we're undertaking here in this administration.